Started. All right, everybody. So this panel is about how gaming helps with mental health. If you're looking for another panel, then you're stuck now because we shut the doors. You're trapped. All right. Have an open mind. You might learn something. All right. This is going to be our agenda. Introduction, primary challenges, why gaming helps, how to make gaming helpful, and final thoughts and questions. Introduction. My name is Vic Mitchell. Give you a little bit of background of me. I played D&D through the Satanic Panic era of the 80s. For those that don't know what that is, that's another panel. At a later time, you need to wrap yourselves in bubble wrap and be prepared to hear things that may trigger you. I joined the Navy. I was a corpsman. For those that don't know what a corpsman is, corpsmen are like medic. I was medically discharged from the Navy. They tossed me back out into the civilian world with just the skills and education that I had and gave me no help. I struggled for a very long time with the physical and mental issues that it gave me. And gaming was one of the many tools that I used to help get out of that particular place. For those of you that say, oh, but it couldn't be that bad, I would wake up in the morning and cried that I was still alive. That's how bad it was for me. Like I said, I've been gaming for 40 years. I was gaming when I was very young, gamed while I was in the military, and gamed afterwards. After I got out of the military and I started to get back into gaming, one of the things that I noticed was how much gaming was helping me. And I started to observe and take notes, and I began to realize how much it was helping me. But also I was playing with other individuals that had their own personal challenges and how gaming helped them as well. And I started to focus on this a whole lot. And I actually have built campaigns and styles. And so I started to focus heavily on this, and not only being a regular forever DM, I have, and I hate using this word, I wish there was another one beside expert or anything along those lines. I have sort of become really, really good at creating gaming campaigns, characters, and encounters that help individuals that may have mental health ups and downs. So that's me. And as always, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Because, like I said, I'm a government employee. I'm paid twice. I'm paid no mind. I'm paid no attention. So, primary challenges when it comes to dealing with individuals with mental health issues. The first one and the main one generally is social anxiety. This is generally the main umbrella, right where the other issues underneath it, that's why it's at the top, generally it bubbles up from the other ones. But that's generally going to be the main one, social anxiety. They don't like to engage with individuals. They don't like being out in public. They don't like talking. And that's because generally the challenges that they have has worn down their self-esteem to a point right where they feel like anything that they say or do is not good enough. They feel like all they're doing is just messing everything up because of whatever may be causing that mental health issue. The next one is anger management. As most of you know, if you've ever dealt with individuals with mental health problems or challenges, anger has a tendency to bubble up. Generally, it's so focused on themselves, it normally spills over on other individuals because of those challenges. I always put that on there as one of the challenges. The third one is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. That's a very broad category because PTSD can come from anything. And PTSD can last a very long time, and it can go from something like that all the way up to people who've been in car wrecks. Maybe they witnessed their grandmother passing away in front of them from a heart attack or something like that. Anything that can be a traumatic event can create PTSD in an individual. Physical and mental limitations. This is anybody, maybe somebody with a traumatic brain injury. Maybe they got hit in the head with a hammer from a coyote. Or maybe their brother, could be a situation right where they're an amputee. Maybe they're blind in one eye, so on and so forth. And the last one is autism. Now, as many of you know, autism is a little bit of a sore subject with a lot of people because there are some people that say autism is a figment of people's imagination, and there's some people that say that autism it's caused by vaccines, and some people say that autism is a genetic thing. I don't care about any of that junk. What I care about is individuals with autism who come and sit down at a gaming table and they want to try to play and have a good time. That's what I care about. And so because I believe I have a motto, gaming is for anyone, but it's not for everyone. Okay. Now, when I say gaming, please understand, I don't just mean something like Dungeons and Dragons. I could also mean Magic the Gathering, strategy tabletop games like Warhammer 40K or Star Wars Armada, board games, any of that stuff. Gaming is gaming, even online gaming, Call of Duty, MMOs like the new Dune, all that stuff. That's all gaming, and it can be approached in many different ways. I'm going to primarily focus on the tabletop role playing because that's the majority of what I do. But some of the things I'm going to tell you can be integrated in just about anything, especially if it has a role playing aspect to it. Why gaming helps? So, it creates and promotes social interaction. Do y'all remember that number one on the other slide for those that are taking notes? Social anxiety. So, gaming is a tremendous focus. And in the past 5 to 10 years, there has been a very big push. I don't know for those that have been coming to GenCon for a while and you pay attention to games, what's been one of the biggest things that you started to see in a lot of games is that a lot of games now seem to be having this trend, well, not all of them, but a good number of them, into building games that you can play by yourself, a one-person play type of situation, which I think is a phenomenal aspect. And the reason why is if you want to introduce somebody into gaming and they have a hard time with social interaction, you can recommend one of those games to allow them to learn the game by themselves at their own pace. And then they go, oh, I really enjoy playing this game. And you can say, oh, well, how about we could play it together? Or I've got some friends that enjoy playing the game. Maybe we could sit down and play. By them learning to play the game by themselves, they don't feel like they're being judged. They don't feel like they have to keep up with people, because it's generally what one of the biggest things when it comes to social interaction is most people don't want to interact because they feel like they don't belong in society. They're an outlier. And it's a very, very funny thing, because what most people come to realize is that the potential aspects of themselves that they consider themselves to be an outlier, they are not alone by any stretch of the imagination. And if you don't believe me, look at GenCon. Good Lord, there's almost 250,000 people in this city right now that are doing nothing but gaming. So yeah, you are not alone. It promotes social interaction, which is very important. It breaks down that particular I don't belong, no one's going to like me, I'm not going to find my group or my tribe, whatever that mentality may be. The next one is it provides distractions to everyday challenges. This is incredibly important because gaming, I don't know about any of you, but when you game, you're probably not thinking about whether or not you're going to pay your water bill. You're probably not thinking about June in accounting, who's been calling you three times a week because she can't seem to understand why the spreadsheet that you send her doesn't have the net worth of that last month's expense record, or whatever the case may be. So that sort of takes you away from that. And when you're disconnected from the stressors of everyday life, your mind gets to reset. You get to forget those things, but more importantly, it also helps the player forget the things that they in themselves challenge themselves with. So that they forget that they're an outlier. They forget that they may not be able to communicate as well, or so on and so forth. And that helps. That helps bring down that level of stress. It takes away that level of eggshelliness around their mind. It's a safe environment. This sort of like goes into a next couple of ones here, but we're going to go with safe environment first. When you get gamers together, they generally have one thing in common at the very least, and that is the game upon which that they're playing. And if they're decent gamers, and by decent, I don't get your feelings hurt, but by decent gamers, what I mean by that is people who understand that by decent gamers, I mean people that understand that everyone has to start somewhere. And we don't forget that we didn't know how the game worked and we had to learn it as well. And by doing that, we have empathy and understanding for individuals that come in and play. And if we have that much empathy, it's only just a hop, skip, and a jump to the next level of empathy, which is understanding that this individual may or may not have challenges that goes beyond what we ourselves may or may not have. And that's very important. So the safe environment is very, very impactful. And then there's the next level, as you see here, ability to create a space where a player can express thoughts, ideas, and emotions. One of the biggest things that we see with people with mental health issues is that they sort of have a level of uh, non-control, sort of. You know, let's take one of my favorite challenges that I like, um, and I'm not saying that I hope there's more of it. I'm just saying one of the challenges that I like engaging individuals with. There's people with Tourette syndrome, that they have tics. Individuals think that there are some things that is just beyond them being able to do certain aspects. And I love and enjoy sitting them down at the table and showing them that there's a group of people in a game that they can play that doesn't give a high or low damn about that whatsoever. It's absolutely amazing. And once they feel safe and once they feel comfortable and once they feel that they can have those and they don't have to hold them in, because I don't know if you know anybody with a Tourette's or anything, but when they try to stop themselves from that ticking, it grates on them. Some say it's like someone scratching their skin, or it's a terrible mental itch, and it just gets worse until they're able to let their tick go. So being able to provide that helps. It's the same thing with many other issues. People who may have issues controlling their emotions, they may get angry quickly, or maybe that they wind up crying because they feel like that they fail. All of those things. When you create a safe environment, especially with other players and yourself, if you're a game master, that makes someone understand that, hey, you had a moment. We all have moments. It's okay to have those moments. You take your moment, and we'll play when you're ready. Next thing, inspire creativity and imagination. This is so important for people with mental health issues. Does anyone here know why? The analogy that I use is, when someone has mental health issues, whether it's trauma or something else, they build this little shell in their brain. And this is right where that they live most of the time. They live in this little bubble, this terrible little shell. Whether it's trauma, it doesn't matter. But everything is associated in that. When you create or when you create an atmosphere of creativity and imagination, you can't create and imagine in this shell. The reason why you can is because the bad thing or the thing that you're focusing on, everything in that shell stays exactly the same. Especially people with PTSD and depression and a few other things, this is where they are. And that landscape never changes. It's why they're depressed. So when you create imagination and creativity, it pushes them out of it. They get to explore. Now, mind you, it may be just a little crack, and they just stick their head out, and they're like, oh, look, flowers and a unicorn. And then they go back into that shell. But the more that they experience that, the more that they realize that they can step out of it, they'll push more and more and more out of it until they wind up finding a comfortable place. And since I'm here, I'm going to tell you one of my beliefs. And you can agree with it or not, but it's mine. I've seen it. You cannot fix anybody. If you know someone that's going through something, whether it's PTSD, some form of trauma, someone that's going through anything, you can't fix them. Who's the only person that can fix them? Themselves, right. But what you can do is you can be supportive. You can offer tools. You can be there to pick them up when they fall down. And that's sort of what gaming does, okay? There's a lot of people out there that think that they can fix people. And God bless them, because most of them have their hearts in the right places. They've got a good idea, and they go out there. But in reality, the only person that can fix a person is themselves. They have to make that choice. And if you don't believe me, there's a great show called on A&E called Intervention. I don't know if anyone here has ever watched that show, but you'll watch that show, and there are people who are addicted to alcohol, huffing cans, drinking, meth, crack, just about everything. And you'll watch. It'll get to the point of right where that they have the intervention at the very end. And they've actually done, there's actually a study, you can go look it up, but the ones at the end of that show that say, you know what, guys, you're right. I am messed up. I need to go get help. I want to change. And then they go to rehab, have a 90% success rate of staying sober. Whereas the ones that go, I'm only going because my mom said she's going to cut off my money, or whatever the ultimatum was, 90% of the time they wind up dropping out, going back, doing drugs. Their family cuts off all ties with them because they didn't decide to make that change. They felt like they had to be forced to go make that change. And that's a good show to sort of help you understand that. Now, that's not entirely true with every single aspect. There are outliers, of course. There are exceptions to the rules. And like I said, that's just my type of belief. That's because of my experience that I have in it. But if we can't fix somebody, but we can be there for them, if we do everything that we can to be there for them, what's wrong with that? It costs us nothing. How to make gaming helpful. Now, this is probably the part right where all of you actually came in for this meeting. For everything else, you were bored and you were probably napping. I saw some people in the back. No, I'm kidding. How to make helping gameful. Number one is learn about your players. This is most important. Whether you're playing D&D, whether you're playing Magic the Gathering, whether you're playing Warhammer or whatever, learning about your players falls underneath the umbrella of social interaction, right? Now, I'm not talking about that you wind up getting players and you want to know what their first pet's name was or how many brothers and sisters that they got, what the name of their elementary school was, as if you're trying to get the information for their friggin' bank account. You don't need any of that, okay? But sharing your likes and your interests, especially when it comes to the game that you're playing and interacting with them on, can go a long way. So you want to learn about the individuals that are around you, because it's going to be pretty obvious. A lot of times it's pretty obvious when somebody winds up having a challenge that they're dealing with. And when you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable yourself and share some of your issues, it helps people to understand that they may, over time, be willing to share theirs. The next one is create worlds with varied aspects. Fantasy can be made like reality. A good example that I like putting this is in D&D, Player Handbook 2 and 3.5 edition, they actually had a section in there called team building, right, where you could, as a player in D&D, work with other players at your table to actually train together to focus, to wind up creating excessive bonuses. So when y'all were out in a campaign, if one or more or two or more of the characters in the party all focused on doing that skill, you'd wind up getting a bonus to be successful on it. It also encouraged role playing with that. So let's say like you have a thief that's going to pick a lock, but you also have an artificer, which is, those that probably don't play D&D have no idea what I'm talking about. But an artificer is a magical handyman almost, sort of, when you think about it. And they join in, and let's say they pull out a magical lockpick, and now they're helping, that they're listening for the ticks, and one of them does the key, and then you wind up having a barbarian that's just pounding on the door every few seconds to make the pieces move inside. And it all gives them bonuses to wind up picking the lock and being able to get through the door. It creates that interaction through that, and because of that, it takes a very, very simple thing, but it turns it into a little party almost. It turns it into more interaction. People learn to trust each other. People learn to understand each other. So when you create a world, you just don't want to create a campaign or create a scenario, whether you're playing a tabletop game or what may have you, right, where you're pigeonholing your players into doing something. You may want to create a campaign that allows different ways to approach certain problems that can appeal to people. Because when I was very, very depressed, that didn't stop my intelligence. I don't know if anybody could tell or not, but I'm sort of a smart guy. Not the biggest brain on the planet, but I'm not eating rocks and licking windows, okay? I didn't lose any of my intelligence, but I did lose a lot of my self-confidence. I did lose a lot of thinking that, I was a person worth playing with and being around and interacting with people. And trust me, I didn't want that. It just happened over time because of my depression and my pain. And so when I would play D&D, especially when I would create campaigns, I created a lot of scenarios that gave a very broad spectrum of choices that I had no control over to my players. Because I wanted them to not only come up with outside the box things, but I wanted that to be where I could focus my attention on. I sort of created an organic situation right, where I allowed them to come up with crazy and wacky ways, so I would have to engage and be that way. It's not an easy thing to do. D&D can have thousands of outcomes. But because of the way that my brain works, it's one of the reasons why I'm a forever DM, because what's the biggest skill that you need to be a DM? Improvisation. Which means that when we're gaming, very rarely are you going to say anything that will surprise me enough right where I get stuck and I can't do it. And I have to come up with something that's a little weird. But I love it when it happens. I love it. All right, you're walking in, you see a dragon, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to start playing Cotton Eye Joe on my... Oh, well, all right. Well, then in that case, the dragon's going to pull out a banjo and challenge you to a contest. But yeah, so you want to create that type of world, right, where there's a myriad of options and a lot of ideas and ways for people to express themselves. We're going to get a little bit more into this in a little bit more. The next one is you want to cater to the player and party's needs. When I say this, I don't mean make the game easy for them or give them everything that they want, but you do want to make it so that they're comfortable playing it. If you've got an individual that's scared of extremely large animals in real life for whatever reason, you don't want to make a game full of elephants. You know, they're not going to like that. You know, they're going to be, why elephant? You know, and then that's the room that you're in for the next 45 minutes. It goes back to learn about your players. You know, figure out what they like. Maybe that you have players that like intrigue, maybe mystery. So you can create a campaign that has a little bit of that. Just like you would normally when you're a DM. One of the biggest things I see that people fail when it comes to game mastering is they make campaigns that make them happy, not games that make their players happy. And then they wonder why nobody wants to play with them. I can't find any players. Well, that's why. You know, doubly so when you use gaming to try to help individuals, or when you try to create an atmosphere for people with mental health issues to come in and play. You want to create an open atmosphere that engenders their curiosity and their involvement. You want to make it inviting, but you also want to make it fun, not just for them, but for everybody else. The last one here, campaign with kindness and open-minded aspects. Okay, this is very important. You remember what I said a little bit earlier about empathy? This is primarily where that comes into play. Okay, you may have to stop every 45 minutes to allow somebody to get up and walk away because they can't stand being sitting at a table with 5 other people for an extended period of time. You know, they need to take a break. They need to go in the bathroom. Maybe they need to cry. Maybe they need to splash some water on their face. Maybe they need a moment to call their mom, whatever. All right. But you don't get angry about it. You don't say, well, thank God you're back. Now we can keep gaming. Don't be a meanie. What's wrong with you? You know, there are 8 billion people on this planet. If there's 8 billion people on this planet, 0.0001% is how many? Who's good at math here? Come on. 80 million. I'm sorry? 80 million. You're close. Well, yeah. It's either 80 million or 8 million, but that's still a lot of people, right? Right? 80 million, 8 million, that's still a lot of people, correct? Okay. Well, just to let you know, that's how many people on this planet like watching other people squish grapes with their feet. Yeah, ooh. But I guarantee that there's one people like, I'd pay $5 on OnlyFans to see that. Okay? So when you think about that, all right, that should tell you exactly just how many other different types of individuals out there with different types of challenges that I do. One of the things I like to say, I said a little bit earlier, when I was talking about veterans and civilians when it comes to mental health and gaming, I have both panels and they're a little bit different. One of the things I like to say, it's the same cake, just a different recipe, right? And that's the same thing with mental health. It's the same cake, different recipe. It doesn't matter whether it's vanilla, chocolate, German chocolate, some weird pineapple or coconut concoction that your grandmother used to make with some tuna fish in it, though no one knows why. It makes no difference. It's still a cake, right? So you just have to figure out which recipe. And that's where a lot of this comes into play. When you campaign with kindness and open-mindedness, you'll figure it out. And you'll have the tolerance and the understanding to be able to navigate whatever challenges that might be ahead. All right, so where's my other? I had one more. Okay, well, I had one more thing that is not here. All right, so the final panel was going to say a little bit about how and give a couple of examples about campaigning. So one of the biggest examples that I like to give is I had a young lady join a campaign one time, and she was autistic and nonverbal. She did speak, but she did not like to. She refused to. But she wanted to play D&D. Her brother played it, and she loved her brother, and she wanted to do something with her brother. And since her brother loved D&D, that we played D&D. And so she came, but was nonverbal. So you're probably saying to yourself, well, in a game right where you have to talk, how do you make that work? Well, I'm not going to lie to you. It took me a hot moment. This is one of the reasons why I like D&D the way that I like D&D. It's just primarily why I use it for this particular thing, and that's because it's been around a very long time, which means there has been a lot of different things that have been added on, supplements, races. Chances are you can find something through that entire library. So what I did was I asked her brother, I said, hey, I was like, what is your sister, what is she? Oh, well, she loves animals. She likes going to the zoo. She likes sitting outside and drawing. I learned a little bit about her. And so what I did was I went to her with a kinku as a race. Now, for those that probably don't know what a kinku is a bird type of race. Most people think it's a raven, but actually a kinku can be just about any type of avian race. But the thing about kinkus is that they're nonverbal. They're only capable of saying one or two words. And some of them don't speak at all. So I offered that to her as an option. I said, hey, would you like to play a kinku? Here's the thing, she's very intelligent. I gave her the information about the kinku, and she got very excited about that. She loved the idea of having a character that she didn't have to verbalize through. So the next challenge was, how do I integrate this individual into the other one? So what I did was I said, because she watched a few sessions because she came with her brother, she really wasn't into the whole combat situation. She really didn't like those type of interactions. So what I did was, on top of creating the campaign, what I did was I created an alternative sub-campaign for her that interacted with the campaign itself. So let's say like they had to go into a castle. Let's say they had to infiltrate a castle to get to the big bad guy. Well, guess what? The castle had air ducts in it, almost like Mission Impossible. And she could take her character and climb into that, not have any interaction with any guards, not have to worry about any type of combat, but she would have to go through the labyrinth of the air duct system, quote unquote air ducts. We all know castles don't have air ducts, but it's my world. I can do whatever the hell I want. So she would navigate that and try to find certain points. And I set it up right where she had to go and press certain buttons and open up certain valves, which would make gates open within the castle so they could get through quicker and not have to worry about being attacked so much. I never presented a challenge that if that individual wound up possibly having a failure, that it would impact the players overall. In other words, that if they weren't able to push a button, they would get overwhelmed by castle guards and wind up getting killed, because now they're like, oh, I failed and I got everybody killed. No. Just something to help. And it takes a little bit of ingenuity. It takes a little bit of fudging rolls. It takes a little bit of thinking on your feet. But you want to know what? This isn't about lose or failing. It's about creating something that somebody with a challenge can enjoy the game just like everybody else. You're the game master, for God's sakes. You can make the world work however that you want. I don't know why people seem to think, well, it's in the rule book, I have to do it. Phooey to the rule book. When it comes to that whole thing, number 4 applies. Right? Campaign with kindness and open-minded aspects. And we played that campaign for 8 months. And let me tell you something, her little Kinku character, which for those that are wondering was literally it was a raven, but she wanted it to have one white feather above the left eye because she didn't want people to confuse her with other Kinkus, which I thought was absolutely adorable. And it was amazing. She was it was one of the more interesting and fun campaigns I ever did in my life. She added so much to that campaign. But that's one of the ways that you can do that with people with challenges. So, all right, now we get to this one. Final thoughts and questions. Now, these are do's and nopes. Okay. Now, mind you, these are general ones. You can adapt them however that you want. You can agree or not agree with them. But I've been doing this for 40 years, so if you choose not to listen to me, you do so at your own peril. Number one, don't force feed what isn't wanted. You remember what I said earlier about saying that you can't fix people? Only they can fix themselves. You can be supportive. You can provide the tools. You can provide the aspects. They're the ones that have to use it. Number one, don't force feed. Okay? Don't force feed ideas. Don't force feed something. Okay? Because all that does, what is the most stubborn creature on planet Earth? Human beings. Huh? Yes, two-year-olds specifically. Or people that act like 2-year-olds. Remember that percentage thing I did earlier? All right. Number two, stay away from pointed agendas. Some of you are like, what do you mean by pointed agendas? Politics, certain type of religion, things going on in the news, all that type of stuff. Leave that out. I mean, honestly. All right, whether you're playing a strategy game like Warhammer, you're playing a fantasy game like D&D, whether you're doing online gaming, whatever that it is, keep that stuff out of it. Remember, create or inspire creativity and imagination. All right? Why use real world stuff in a world of fantasy away from it? Okay? There's no reason for it except something that you have in your mind that you want to. No one cares about your opinion. Okay? Remember, it's about them. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying that what you feel isn't important, but it's important to you. But it's not important to the goblin and elf faction who's trying to get the most negotiation with the orc and dwarf faction, so they can wind up making the most money on the new mithril exchange down by the river. Okay, no one cares about the Prime Minister of India and what he's doing. All right, number three, do not focus directly on issues. Flank that problem. Okay? You're in the game. Someone presents something. Maybe it's a personality issue. Maybe it's an interaction issue, something like that. When that comes up, don't go at it head on. You remember what I said earlier about the most stubborn creatures on the planet? So, but when you flank it, when you come out and you create an organic situation that requires them to fix it or the group fix it, and it makes it seem natural, that's how you want to handle it. I don't know how many Futurama fans that we have in here. Excellent. So do y'all remember the episode where Bender got stuck floating through space and he had that whole thing living on his butt, whole thing, and he winds up killing everybody by accident, and then he meets God, and he asks God how he does it, and God says, well, when you do it right, you know, they think that you did nothing at all. Right? That's how it is to be a game master, especially when you have somebody with mental health. If you do it right, it'll be like you did nothing at all. And when you create that bed for organic type of solutions that the individual and the group that they've learned to trust and play with can fix that, not only does it make them stronger, builds a bigger circle of trust, but now there's not a bad guy. There's not anything. So just keep that in mind. Last but not least, do engage your players to make sure the story and style is engaging. This is very, very important. Okay? Just because everyone seems like they're enjoying it doesn't mean that they couldn't enjoy it more. All right? As we know, some people with mental health issues They'll just go along to go along. They're so desperate to be included, they will pretend that they like something that is killing them just because they're starving for some level of something. Okay? So always be inquisitive, always ask. All right? That kindness thing, that empathy thing, very important.